You bet.
And thanks to At Home for joining us this hour. She said later, looking back at it, that the hardest thing for her was having her parents there. She said she needed them there to support her. They did provide her great support. It gave her strength. She loved that they were there to support her. The most difficult part of the whole ordeal was that they were there, that specifically she couldn't protect her mom. She couldn't protect her elderly mom and her elderly dad from what happened there in the room.
The most difficult part, my parents were my mother turned 80 on the day of the vote to confirm Clarence Thomas. And I believe the difficult part was to watch my parents, who were elderly people, who had lived good lives and raised their children, and to be honest and truthful and hardworking and all of the things that we want parents to do for their children, to watch them go through it. The sense that they felt that they couldn't protect me from it. And I think it was really hard on them. It undermined their confidence in whether or not the government truly represented them. And for an African-American family, those kinds of questions have existed. And to have it personalized, I think, was really difficult. But I have to say, they were so strong and so wonderful and so supportive, and they never wavered. But it was still hard for me to watch them go through that and know that I couldn't protect them from the feelings that they had.
It was so hard on me to know that I couldn't protect them. It was hard for them to see that they couldn't protect me. It was hard for me to see that I couldn't protect them. That portion of that interview with Anita Hill that you just saw there, that has actually never been aired before. I had seen it in a transcript from that interview they did for the Headliner show for which she was interviewed. Because I had seen that in the transcript, I asked for it to be restored so I could show it tonight. Specifically because this moment for me had always been such a kind of heart-in-your-throat moment from that hearing. That hearing where Anita Hill came forward reluctantly. She did not want to testify. It was after the confirmation hearings for Judge Clarence Thomas were already over. After the close of those hearings, Professor Hill's allegations came to light, and they basically reopened the proceedings to hear from her. And it has always stuck with me, this part that happened right at the very start.
We will make room for your family to be able to sit.
It's a very large family, Chief.
Well,
Senator.
we will begin, but attempt to accommodate as quietly as we can what may be an unusual arrangement. I might ask, is everyone who is sitting behind you necessary and to sit behind you, and maybe they could stand and let your family sit? We must get this hearing moving. With there 2 chairs on the end here. We will find everyone a seat, but we must begin. Now, Professor Hill, at the risk of everyone behind you standing up, would you be kind enough to introduce your primary family members to us?
Okay. I'd like to introduce, first of all, my father, Albert Hill.
Mr. Hill, welcome.
My mother, Irma Hill.
Ms. Hill.
My mother is going to be celebrating her 80th birthday on the 16th.
Happy birthday in advance.
That chairman there is very recognizable, a much younger Joe Biden, then senator, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. That's, of course, before he went on to multiple runs for president and ultimately the vice presidency for 8 years under President Barack Obama. And as you can see, he's being very kind there to Professor Hill's family. She had just explained in her opening statement that she had grown up on a farm in rural Oklahoma. She was the youngest of 13 children. She and her siblings were raised by those parents, she said, in a deeply religious atmosphere in the Baptist church. She'd explained that that was still a very important part of her life. And then her parents are shown in after she explains it. And then the hearing gets underway. Her parents sitting there behind them, her mother on the eve of her 80th birthday. And then with them sitting there behind her to support her, this is how it goes. And actually, this is almost the best of how it goes. I should tell you, if you have kiddos watching with you tonight at home and you do not want them to hear how this went, this might be a good time to hit pause or hit the mute button.
Can you tell me what incidences occurred, of the ones you've described to us, occurred in his office?
Well, I recall specifically that the incident about the Coke can occurred in his office at the EEOC.
And what was that incident again?
The incident with regard to the Coke can that's spelled out in my statement.
Once again for me, please.
The incident involved his going to his desk, getting up from a work table, going to his desk, looking at this can and saying, "Who put pubic hair on my Coke?"
Was anyone else in his office at the time?
No.
Was the door closed?
I don't recall.
Are there any other incidences that occurred in his office, in his office period?
There is, I recall at least one instance in his office at the EEOC where he discussed some pornographic material, or he brought up the substance or the content of pornographic material.
And again, it's difficult, but for the record, what substance did he bring up in this instance at EEOC in his office? What was the content of what he said?
Well, this was a reference to an individual who had a very large penis, and he used the name that he had been referred to in the pornographic material.
Do you recall what it was?
Yes, I do. The name that was referred to was Long Dong Silver.
Let's go back to the first time that you alleged Judge Thomas indicated he had more than a professional interest in you. Do you recall what the first time was, and what with as much precision as you can, what he said to you?
As I recall, it either happened at lunch or it happened in his office when he said to me very casually, "You ought to go out with me sometime."
You ought to, or you are to?
You ought to.
With regard to the other incidences that you have mentioned in your opening statement, can you tell us how you felt at the time? Were you uncomfortable? Were you embarrassed? Did it not concern you? How did you feel about it?
The pressure to go out with him, I felt embarrassed about, because I had given him an explanation that I thought it was not good for me as an employee working directly for him to go out. I thought he didn't take seriously my decision to say no, and that he did not respect my having said no to him. The conversations about sex, I was much more embarrassed and humiliated by. The two combined really made me feel sort of helpless in a job situation, because I really wanted to do the work that I was doing. I enjoyed that work. But I felt that that was being put in jeopardy by the other things that were going on in the office. And so I was really, really very troubled by it and distressed over it.